That was huge. Washington pulls off a 42-25 win over Illinois.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward, Mazda, Move and Be Moved. Just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the show out a lot. Also, when you click that little bell, you never miss when we go live like this, which is always just an absolute blast. And speaking of an absolute blast, that's what I've got for you today. On this here podcast, I'm going to spend some time on the defense, talk about some of those second half adjustments, and maybe some worries, especially on the third down, but we're going to get there in a little while, because Washington's big three, they had a tremendous day today in this 42-25 win over number 23 Illinois. It's great to see Jedd Fisch and co get on the board with a ranked win this season as well. And this is one of those things where I look at this game, and from top to bottom, I got to take my cap off and tip it to Jedd Fisch, because he called a tremendous game today. And it started early on, where out of the gate, I kept telling everybody in the box, like, hey, I have something I want to say. I don't want to say it. And I'm going to say it now, because I think it's certainly the right time to say it. That Illinois defense just looked like absolute Swiss cheese. You dive into the numbers, Washington 449 yards of total offense in this game. Just like the Huskies, they really couldn't get much of any stops really on third down. And this is one of those things where you look at the fact that Washington had not scored a point in the first quarter since their win over Washington State. Seeing them come back like this is really tremendous, where honestly, Washington shouldn't have been stopped all day. If you take out the drive where they just sat on the ball at the end of the game, outside of the 3 and out, they scored on every possession. And even on that drive, you had an opportunity to really try to put Illinois away early in this game. And it's something where you go back and you just look at the game script. The defense really did struggle early on, but you just look at the way the offense was playing in this game. I truly, from the word go, I didn't have many concerns because of the way the offense played, because it just felt like they had Illinois on their heels at every single turn. And I look at that first drive with the holding call taken out. On 9 of 10 plays, Washington gained 8+ yards. So right there, right from the start, you were already at an advantage, and you just showed that, everything that happened last week at Michigan was in the past. It was something that I really appreciated that Jedd Fisch said after the game, was that he said, yeah, fans and the media and everything, you guys are a lot slower to move on. And, fair, that is part of our job. Move on a lot slower from a game than we as, players and coaches do. And I think that's a completely fair point, and also something that we're just doing our job when we say these sort of things. But I look at a game like this, and it's very clear that what happened last week at Michigan was still weighing on Jedd, and against a defense that was allowing 370 yards per game so far this season. I think that this was just a really nice game plan right off the top. I was texting with our good buddy, friend of the program, Jake Butt, after the game, who was calling the game for the Big Ten Network. And one of the things that he mentioned was that he was really impressed with this game plan from Jedd Fisch. And obviously that starts with a couple of key plays early on. Dezmen Roebuck was just absolutely tremendous in the first quarter with a pair of touchdowns. And I love everything that he brings to the table anyway, as just a freshman wide receiver who, it's so fun, where Lars asked him about, asked Jedd about Dezmen after the game. One of the things he said was he's wise beyond his years. And I think that's so clear, not just in his understanding of Washington's offense and spacing and leverage and different things like that, but just his awareness on the sideline was so impressive on that second touchdown catch, especially. Those are just the little things that gave the Huskies such a big boost in this game. And I want to talk about the penalties later on, but it was so clear that no matter what was going on over the course of this game, this team just never felt deterred. I know that at one point it was 8 for 89 yards. It's still, Washington had 8 penalties for 89 yards in this game, and you never felt deterred. That first quarter holding call on Decker DeGraff on the opening drive looked like it could have been a drive killer. And maybe on the road, that is a drive killer for this Husky team. But you bounce back from that really nicely. And 2 plays later, you're in the end zone with 13-yard score to Dezmen Roebuck. Plays like that to open up the game, and just having such a positive game script like that early on, which has just been so unlike this team for truly the last month plus, is just a huge credit to this coaching staff, because everything was in rhythm. Everything was on time. And Demond was finding open spaces. He was just running at the right time. Everything just looked so good from the word go that it does all come back to Jedd and what that looked like. And, you got to, of course, give credit to Denzel Boston as well. A career day for him. 10 catches is career high. 153 yards is also a career high, and 2 total touchdowns. I want to talk about the double pass a little bit later on. But just having a guy like that, where our good buddy Alex Katzen over with Huskies Wire pointed this out to me after the game. Denzel Boston was the only true freshman wide receiver to have a reception in this game. Yes, tight ends, running backs, the only true freshman, non-true freshman wide receiver. And I think that's really crucial, because this is just how Washington's offense has been built this year. And as we see Dezmen Roebuck come along, as we see Raiden Vinesbury, Decker DeGraff, all these guys still continue to learn and grow, seeing Chris Lawson get in this game. Baron Naone played a couple of snaps today as well, the true freshman tight end. Seeing all those guys continue to learn and grow is great, but having just such a reliable veteran, obviously preseason All-American, all of that, is so great for just everybody on this offense. And it's so great for Demond Williams as he continues to grow as well. You look at his day, 26 of 33. That's a 79% completion percentage for 280 yards and 4 touchdowns. Is just, for Demond, it's just come to be expected at this point to have such a high completion percentage, especially in the rain with what the weather was like, especially as we got early into the second half of this game, is so good to see. And it's so much fun to just watch Demond continue to grow, because this was another one of those games where, I know I harp on this every week, as we continue to watch Demond week in and week out, there are just things he continues to improve on. And, we can talk about that truck stick that he had at the end of the third quarter, early in the fourth, which was just a tremendous play by him. But it's one of those things where, Jedd Fisch said after the game, I love to see that, but I hate to see that, but I love it, but I hate it. I love watching Demond continue to grow every week, because he did, in terms of what the game script called for and where Washington was on the field, he made the right play going through that defender. Is it a scary hit to take? Yes. But seeing him continue to grow and evolve week in and week out is so much fun to watch, because it's so clear that he has the potential to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And especially coming off such a poor game at Michigan last week, to bounce back the way he did. Again, 280 yards passing, and he also added 66 more on the ground. This is just, again, what we've grown to expect from this kid. And as a true sophomore who has now 10 starts under his belt, it still feels a little bit unfair to be like, 350 total yards in a game. Yeah. Okay. That's just kind of where we are now, is insane. And it's fun to think about at the same time. But as I continue to just look at Demond and look at a game like this, it was great to see Carver Willis and John Mills back up front, because the pass rush was non-existent from Illinois today. He had all day to throw, and it showed up in the run game too. And again, I want to get to some of that in a minute, but the reason I wanted to make sure I credited a lot of this to Jedd Fisch is because he came out last week after the game and doubled down on it on Monday. It said, I did not prepare Demond Williams well enough for that game at Michigan, because he turned the ball over 3 times, all those other things. He wore that. He ate a lot of the criticism for all of that. And then Demond just looks much better today. And it's great to see that these are just kind of the things that, again, you're growing to expect from him on a week in, week out basis. And it's just so much fun to think about, because nothing takes you just over the edge in college football quite like a good quarterback. And Husky fans, you know that as well as anybody with what we've seen from Michael Penix Jr. in previous years. So I look at what Demond brings to the field, and every single day he just does something so electrifying and so much fun to watch. And, there are several plays that you can chalk that up to today, and just think that this is just so refreshing to know that you have another truly elite quarterback at the helm. I don't think there's any reason to place him outside of the top 3 in the Big Ten at this point in time, from just everything he shows on a week in, week out basis. And it's just such an exciting thought to think about everything that he brings to the table and everything that the Huskies can do with him at the helm, because now you're sitting here at 6-2, and you look at the bye week next week. That's great. your next 3 opponents before Oregon are all extremely gettable games. At Wisconsin is gettable. I know, whatever is going on in Oregon right now is fun to see, and I'm trying to keep an eye on that as well. And then you have Purdue at home, and then you go to UCLA. Very gettable. And if you walk into that Oregon game at 9-2, a little bit of swagger, a little bit of confidence, especially behind this young quarterback, I think anything can happen. And it just shows what Jedd Fisch is building and that there's so much to be excited about. And a lot of what Jedd is building is predicated right now around these superstars. And it was just such a massive day for Jonah Coleman, Denzel Boston, and the like. And let's jump over there. Right after a message from our good friends over at Mazda. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward, yeah, you know what it is. Right before the half, that double pass from Demond Williams to Denzel Boston to Jonah Coleman for a 12-yard touchdown that gives the Huskies the lead back for good in that game. And with Denzel hitting the little Michael Penix bow and arrow celebration, you love to see all that. That gave the Huskies so much energy. The crowd was all jacked up. It was awesome. You absolutely love to see that. And I feel like that moved everybody forward. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. So as we look at Washington's big 3 in this game, it was really great to see a resurgent performance from Jonah Coleman. 14 carries, 75 yards and a touchdown, and adds 4 catches for 32 yards and another score. Getting over 70 yards for the first time since Washington State is great to see. I wasn't necessarily very impressed with what this Illinois defense brought to the table. As I discussed with our good buddy Sonny Verma from Locked On Illini a little bit earlier on in the week, he was able to force missed tackles. He was able to just create some more space. And a lot of that is due to having John Mills and Carver Willis back along the offensive line, which is also really, really great to see. And as I just continue to look at Washington's just growing offense, I don't think that just everything that Jedd Fisch really wants this offense to be is there yet, because you want to be able to spread the ball around a little bit more. But right now, when you're able to lean on a pair of superstars like Denzel Boston and like Jonah Coleman, that can make up for a lot. And it's really exciting because those guys just do so much for your offense. Like watching Denzel today, even after he got hurt, where, quick note on that, it doesn't seem like anything is fairly wrong, where obviously he came back in the game a play later and is pumping up the crowd, doing all that sort of stuff, which is always awesome to see. But on top of that, he did speak with us in the media after the game, which is always a great sign because UW usually doesn't let players that were injured talk for the most part. So seeing him speak with us was, again, just a really good sign for anybody who might be a little bit concerned about that. But just being able to rely on 2 guys so heavily is such a big thing for this offense. And I love it because as you continue to watch Dezmen Roebuck show flashes of brilliance, Braden Vinesbright show flashes, there are so many things to be excited about as a whole with this offense. But just having a guy like Denzel who can take up 14 targets for you in the meantime, while this really, really young team continues to grow and continues to develop, is such a positive sign. And I really do love that everything this Husky team brings to the table in that regard, because you look at just everything that you can get from these 2 guys in the meantime. It's such a promising thought. No, hey, as we're in the middle of all this, we are now joined by Lars Hanson. Lars, it's great to have you here mid-flight. Here, gotta unmute your mic there real fast. But I'm sitting here talking about just this everything that we're seeing from Denzel Boston and Jonah Coleman. There's so much to like about this Husky team. And while we just love everything that these guys have brought to the table so far, as just Dezmen Roebuck and Braden Vinesbright and Decker DeGraff continue to develop, seeing Chris Lawson and Omari Evans, also in there is just a nice little touch to add some support to this receiver core. But I just love everything these guys bring to the table, because right now in this offense, you don't really need to worry about much else when you have both these guys on top of their game.
You do, and it's what you expect from 2 upperclassmen, Jonah being a senior, Denzel being a junior. And when we're not talking about just them accruing yards, those easy catches, things like that. It's always in crucial moments of the game where you talk about Denzel was moving the chains consistently against Illinois. I think that was what was the big takeaway for me, where it wasn't just getting him on those swing passes and things like that. It was chunk plays. We're talking 20, 25, 30 yarders. And we've almost come to expect that. So when he doesn't have a game like that, now we're at the same time not going to say that he should go for 120, 150, whatever it ended up being today, every single week.
Yeah.
But he has that ability. And I think this is when we see Washington at their best. Like, that's how good this offense can be. And so that's why when we were talking about this before the season, we know how good this team can be. So when you have games like the Michigan game and even in weeks past, it's a little bit weird because it's like, okay, you're not playing up to your potential, but today truly did show what Washington can be.
So one of the biggest things that I think about with this offense that we've talked about a lot throughout the season is explosive plays. Washington was able to put together 10 explosive plays in this game, and 9 of them come from one of the big 3 guys that you expected to be, where Demond Williams had a couple of rushes. All 6 explosive pass plays today went to Denzel Boston. That's pass plays of 15 plus for those of you who are wondering. And it's one of those things where I love what these guys bring to the table so much. And I'm sure people are going to have questions like, oh, why isn't there more just target share going around? Where outside of Denzel, I have to pull this up real fast. Outside of Denzel, who had 14 targets today, the next closest was Jonah Coleman, Raiden Vinesbright, and Decker DeGraff, all had 4 targets in this game. So it's one of those things where it can be predictable against elite defenses, against Ohio State, against Michigan. And we've seen this, again, very young team have struggles in that regard in some of those settings. But for what Jedd Fisch is building and where this program seems to be going, there's still so much to be excited about, because you look at everything the way it's going right now. All of these guys are just continuing to get better on a week in, week out basis. You can point to any one player. And again, with so many true freshmen starting, where you had 3 of them today on offense and 4 or 5 more that played. It's great to see all that. But in these next 3 games, Purdue, Wisconsin, UCLA, I know that's out of order. I look at that and I just think you can continue to lean on those guys and still wind up as a 9-win team going into that Oregon game.
Exactly. Like, everything is still in play for Washington. And the way where we talked about this, Jedd Fisch's offense is kind of predicated upon 2 players getting the majority of the share of the targets. And then you just figure everything out from there, from 3 through, call it 7 on down. You don't know what you're going to get on a week in, week out basis in terms of targets, but you don't really need to, as long as those first 2 guys end up carrying their weight. And when you look at what Denzel brings to the table, and then Jonah, in a way, Jonah's kind of been the thing that Jedd Fisch has never had from a passing perspective, where it's usually been, Dorian Singer or some other receiver, Tanner McLaughlin comes to mind as a tight end, where you have that second person, but it's always either an outside threat or a slot guy. Jonah being a running back and having that, target share, I think is kind of what's unlocking this offense, because you can have so many different guys play that 3rd and 4th role, whether it was Dezmen Roebuck today getting 3 targets in the first quarter, 2 touchdowns, and then didn't do anything else in the game. He didn't have to. And I think that's the whole point, is you don't have to say, well, now Dezmen has to be that 8 to 10, 12 target a game kind of guy. No. I mean, maybe in a year or 2 from now, sure. But you don't need that when you have Jonah being able to get open in various ways, and then also still establishing himself as a 4+ yard, run type of guy. It was kind of funny, though, when you think about that in the same breath of he had 7 carries for 29 yards and then doubled the yardage on 1 play. That was kind of, in a way, you don't rely on that, but that's why Jonah's so good, is you just keep giving the ball, keep giving him opportunities. And then once he finally breaks one, I feel like after that play was when the kind of tide broke in Washington's favor, and Illinois really couldn't slow down UW in really any facet.
I felt like they couldn't slow him down all day. Like I was saying a few minutes ago, I know I was saying to you and Alex in the box, there's something I want to say, and I can't say it. It was that defense just looked like Swiss cheese all day long. And that it's just something that no matter what was going on, like, last week against Michigan, it just wasn't working. And I go back to a couple weeks ago against Rutgers, and it's, that was a similarly like very bad defense in similar regards. But having John Mills and Carver Willis back along the offensive line just changes so much. And I know we've harped on that for several weeks that, it sucks these guys aren't around, but you have to play with who's in front of you. And it also just kind of speaks to the youth and the depth that is continuing to build along this Husky, just not just the offensive line, but just the offense as a whole, because you can, I just look at this offensive line and there were so many worries, and I think rightfully so, right? Like that's just something that we've talked about throughout the season, that, hey, if this is an average group, you're going to be really happy with that. But so much of the game plan was just thrown off by not having either of those guys. And we both think that Pocky Finau is certainly a long-term part of these plans, but when you just have to have so much stuff just be shrunk down to half the field, where reads are going to be a lot tougher going to your left because, there's just been more pressure coming from that direction, especially when you look at last week against Michigan. Having those guys back, it showed in such a big way because it just opens up everything in this offense.
Yeah, I think I tweeted, I don't know when it was in the game that it kind of dawned on me. I think it might have been second quarter or third quarter, whichever one it was. DeMond could light a cigar, sit back in the recliner, do really whatever he wanted to do because he had so much time. And you might say maybe that was Illinois dropping guys into coverage, but then DeMond used his legs. And so no matter what Illinois tried to do to slow down DeMond, it didn't work. And it honestly didn't work from start to finish. I mean, you can look at the drives where UW didn't get production in terms of points or even, move the ball beyond, let's say, 25 yards total on the drive. That was more play calling on Jedd's part than it was Illinois doing something to stop Washington. And again, there was a handful of plays that, we kind of looked at and said, ooh, kind of dodged the bullet there. But other than that, UW was in control from start to finish.
Saw the ball bouncing on the ground, which, it looked like it was just, even when it wasn't raining out, just some butter on it or something. But let's switch sides of the ball here because I was really happy with how Ryan Walters turned around the defense in the second half. And we see it in the comments. We have to talk about the officials. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For Washington, Denzel Boston delivered in a big way. Career day. 10 catches, 153 yards, a touchdown, and then he also threw a 12-yard touchdown as well. When the pressure was on, he came through, no hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance wasn't a fluke. Denzel is on a streak. And just like Denzel delivered for the Huskies, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash streaks, you save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive, fuel your game day, only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. We also got a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I build parlays, try player props, and even follow the live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Lars, we should just start with the refs because Washington's defense was really solid. Could have had as many as 4 interceptions in this game. I know Xe'ree Alexander had a drop pick where that probably would have wound up being a pick 6, but going back and watching it, the Tacario Davis call, you're calling like the high hit, which is a better explanation than you got for the one against Ohio State a few weeks ago, which I think in hindsight might have been worse. But the Tacario Davis call was just absolutely atrocious. And there's still something to be said for Washington's discipline. You were not disciplined in this game. You finished the game with 8 penalties for 89 yards, but 30 of them came on that one play with the where Jedd Fisch explained after the game that the side judge turned a run on the McLaughlin interception and ran into an assistant coach, which he said Washington obviously, you can't have that. But this is one of those games where the discipline wasn't great, but also this officiating crew was less than stellar to, just put it nicely.
I was going to say, yeah, they don't even qualify to be Pac-12 refs back in the day. Like, that was how bad it was. And I still go back to that Tacario one that you mentioned. Somebody said, I think it was, Bill Schwartz, who used to cover there was a number of people that pointed it out. There might have been some contact, but nowhere near enough to warrant that call in that moment, especially in the end zone. I think, you're talking about a real stretch play there. But, we've talked about the penalties at length this season. Yeah, it might look bad if you just read the numbers and you didn't add the context, but this is a game where I'm not worried about the penalties because, like you mentioned, you have played relatively disciplined. Again, I think Jurassic Party had a couple, maybe one. Yeah, it wasn't great, but for the most part, it seemed like every time that when the refs threw a flag and it was like, oh, wait, are they going to throw this one on UW? It was actually against Illinois.
Yeah, there were a couple of those.
And so that was kind of like, it seemed like that type of day as the game went along. And it was like, okay, maybe they dodged another bullet here. And I think there was one, like the Jonah Coleman run that was a hands to the face on Illinois.
Yeah, right.
That was one where I was almost thinking they were going to throw it on Jonah. And I was like, okay, come on. Like, this was after the Tacario Davis interception that got wiped away. And I'm just like, this is reminding me of what's going on in the NBA right now. Like if that were to be called, like that was just egregious. And I think the fact that UW was able to overcome that, didn't let that get the best of him, I think that can actually be a real factor in terms of if you feel like the refs aren't against you, but if it starts to feel like that, you can kind of get more undisciplined and get a little angry. And that didn't happen.
So the one that I mentioned a little bit earlier that really was telling for me was on the opening drive when you had the holding call on Decker DeGraff on the little pop pass to Jordan Washington. The fact that you're still able to score 2 plays later and that didn't kill the drive and kill the momentum. You have to kick a field goal down there in the red zone. That was the one where it was, okay, there is certainly a different feeling around this team this week. And that was like, I felt really good from that moment on, but that was one of those ones where it's, okay, yeah, in previous weeks, like this might have just really just put a dagger into the momentum early on in this game, which is great to see. And the defense in the first half, they did a lot to try to stop the momentum where they couldn't stop Illinois, especially on third down where it was 8 of 11 at one point in the game. It was 7 of 8 at one point too. And it was one of those things where I was really frustrated with how it all looked. And you had a couple of missed opportunities, right? But the first PI call into Tacario Davis in the end zone, I didn't love that one either, where it just looked like he had a hand on his back and wasn't pulling, wasn't ripping, do anything to impede the receiver's progress. But gonna not complain about refs anymore because Washington won by 17 points. I looked at the defense and it was great to see them forcing turnovers in the secondary. I wasn't enthralled with the defensive line today, especially against a bad Illinois offensive line, where I thought there was, something to be said about the run defense. I don't know what Illinois' deal was with not giving Caden Fagan the ball more, but that's not our issue either. Not going to complain about that though. But I look at what Washington did in this game, and I would give the defense like a C because I was really happy with what happened after the break. But my question is, what are we going to see over the next couple of weeks? Because you look at Wisconsin and you look at Purdue, you're playing 2 of the worst offenses in the Big Ten now. And you did a good job against Luke Altmaier. I know it was raining, but you held him to under 200 yards. He had only thrown 1 interception on the season coming into this game. So you can't be too mad about how this played out. There's still certainly stuff to improve, but I look at the next 2 weeks and I still think that I have questions about the defense, but there are so many opportunities to get right against 2 legitimately bad offenses.
Exactly. I mean, I think for me, I think back to the Ty missed sack on Luke Altmaier. That was one where you could even see the frustration on Ty. Like I think he slapped his helmet or did whatever he did. You could just see it's like they're right there, but yet at the same point, there's only like 2 or 3 guys that are right there. I think there was a point in the game where there was no sacks and no tackles for loss for both teams.
Yeah.
So, in that regard, it wasn't like the Michigan game and some of these other ones where UW doesn't have anything and the other defense is actually getting home on demand and it makes a bad situation even worse. I think, Wisconsin doesn't worry me. If Luke Fickell's still the coach at that point, I'll be surprised. But, when you talk about the Purdue game, who knows? We'll see what happens there. But neither one truly should be a true threat to Ryan Walters. Ryan Walters' true threat to do damage is against himself. I think the fact that we've seen him make adjustments in game, and you look at that second half where, they were 8 of 11 and they started to, get a little wear down in the second half and didn't have as much success on third down. That was exactly what you want to see. And by the way, we'll probably hear, we won't talk to Ryan Walters on Tuesday because they have a bye week. But when we do get to talk to him again, if we get to run this game back, I think you just got to tip your cap to Luke Altmaier on some of those throws. Like there was a couple where it was like, okay, you know what?
That one-handed catch by Hank Beatty on third down, and then the other one later on when Alex McLaughlin laid him out. Those are tremendous plays.
Exactly. And I think that to me is what, you kind of take away from it where, okay, you got beat on some good throws, but you didn't truly get beat at the end of the day. And I think that to me, especially when you're going against those 2 offenses, I'm not worried.
No, and that's a big part of this, but it's still something where you can do more. Like also, speaking of Luke Fickell, it's the end of the third quarter and Oregon is only up 14-0 on Wisconsin, which is absolutely hilarious. I just wanted to throw that out there. But I look at this game, and one of the biggest takeaways that I had from this is I know he missed the 3 games with the injury and everything, but Tacario Davis is everything that you hoped he would be, and then some. Like legitimately, both those penalties today could have easily been picked up. Like if you just showed them to anybody and said, "Oh, that was a penalty call there," I didn't see it. He just unlocks this defense in more ways than one, and seeing him come down with interceptions this year is awesome because including ones that have been called back, he has 4. Like he has been everything that you've needed him to be. And it's unfortunate he didn't get to show that against Jeremiah Smith in Ohio State because he changes everything when he's on the field. And somebody else who does that I was really excited to see get a start today and get more playing time was Rashawn Clark, because he had a really tough matchup when he was playing in the slot against Hank Beatty, and he more than held his own. And this is one of those guys where we talked about him all spring, and then he just wasn't quite the same player during fall camp, but seeing him just come alive today, have that interception, and have, he's very young career, but have arguably the best game of his young career is an exciting thought, because this trio of corners on the outside, including him in the nickel, is, in my opinion, one of the best in the conference that just doesn't get talked about enough, because Officiant's Prysock on the other side has been tremendous this season. I've been really happy with what he's bringing to the table too. He was, I gotta check this live and make sure. Yeah, he was tied for 3rd on the team today with 9 tackles. Like he had a tremendous day, and seeing all those guys improve is great. And there is still work to be done. There's no getting around that. But this defense has been just everything you've needed it to be in spots this year. And even in the 2 losses, you've given up 24 points. You can win a game doing that.
You absolutely can. And I think, when you think about when Rashawn committed to John Richardson and the staff, it was about seeing that high-end potential. And when you run back what it's going to look like next year, Dylan Robinson probably slides into a Houston's Prysock slot. Now, again, you would say Tacario spot. They might go out and get a quarterback transfer in the portal, but you can't predict that right now. But you're looking pretty confident, just as you are this season, as you are next year, with what that group is going to look like. And it was good to see, Rashawn get that interception late in the 4th quarter to shut things down, because to me, he's been a guy that's been teetering on the edge of a true breakout season. And I think this might, to coin Jedd Fisch's favorite word, this might be Rashawn's foundational game, where we look back and say, that was when he put it all together. That was the game where he finally got some production, made an impact, and we can now see moving forward. I'm not sure there's a question between him and Leroy who the better one is, at least in the slot.
Well, it's also just something where I got a call yesterday, and I was told that Rashawn was going to start in the slot today. And I said, this is a great idea. This is what it should be, because Leroy's skill set is just better suited outside. And we know he's had his struggles this year. There's no getting around that. He's certainly bounced back a little bit from that Ohio State game, but the athleticism and the quick twitch and the ball skills that Rashawn has in the slot is why we've been talking about him starting there all year long, like from just the start of spring practice on. And he got to show that today against arguably the best true slot receiver in the conference in Hank Beatty. Like that was just one of the fun things that I was really looking forward to from this game. And I think that, we haven't even mentioned Alex McLaughlin's name, just the way he ties this whole defense together, but all of the pieces are there on the secondary to put it together and have a performance like this, where you do, again, hold one of the Big Ten's best passers to under 200 yards. You turn him over twice. That's all tremendous. And just to see it tied together in a game like this, where you're able to get a 17-point win is awesome. And there are still questions about the defense, and that's fair, but you can build on today. There's no doubt about that.
Not only that, you think about our prediction before the show, we knew Alex was going to have an impact if they were going to win this game. You had 10 tackles for him, right? I had 13.
I had 10 plus. Yeah, I'll take that one.
And so I think we kind of had a hunch where if Alex had his type of game, UW wins this game defensively. And yeah, it might not look pretty the entire 4 quarters, but I mean, you got him probably coming back next year. I mean, he could go to the NFL draft, but I think, if he comes back for another season, this defense is going to be special next year.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things where I talked to him about it a little bit after the game. And because I asked him if there's any one position he feels most comfortable at, since he has played all over the place. And he's just such a perfect fit for this Ryan Walters defense because he can do a little bit of everything. And another thing we've just, again, harped on this show all spring and all summer is having a versatile guy like that who can line up all over the formation is just so critical for what Ryan Walters wants to do, because this defense is predicated around a safety who can tackle and a safety that is always going to be around the football. And Alex McLaughlin just is that guy.
He really is, and I don't think he's even truly tapped into his full potential. Like, if you run it back one more year, I think there's still areas where he could get better and more consistent.
Absolutely.
I think that would be kind of where I'd focus more for Alex, because, man, like, his size, his impact, if he gets up to 210, like, I know it doesn't sound like, wow, gaining 5-10 pounds is going to do a huge amount. Getting to 202 was big for him. Think about what happens if he has another 5 pounds. Like, that is. I watched Taylor Mays run off the field into the tunnel after the game, and I'm like, Matt, can you just give him your routine of what you do? See how he can add a couple more pounds there, because it's going to be special.
Lars, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I mean, I just think that Jedd needed this win. You looked at everything that came to fruition. Dezmen needed this win. Everything that was in front of Washington is still there. You're probably picking up 2 more wins against Wisconsin and Purdue. UCLA is going to be what it is. And then you got the Oregon game at the end of the year. And I think that, to me, you're running in where maybe you go 3-4 straight wins. What happens in that Oregon game at Husky Stadium? Don't be surprised if it's 5.
So I love where you're going with that. And just one more thing that I want to mention before we get out of here is I was just looking at all the recruits just up in the first couple of rows there. Not only were they all into the game, but it's just one of those things where I spent some time about it, talking about it before you hopped on. All of the young guys that Washington is building around right now, thinking about where this program can be even 12 months from now, is a really, really exciting thought, because the foundation of your team, yes, you're losing some big time names that we talked a lot about on the show. Denzel Boston, most likely, Jonah Coleman, and Tacario Davis, Ephesians Prasock as well, to the draft, are big. But the way you continue to build, if you can use the transfer portal effectively in January, I was going to say December, but it's January now. If you can just continue to use the transfer portal effectively one more time, all of a sudden you can make a gigantic leap next year. I think Washington is already in the midst of a leap. You've tied your season win total. You're bowl eligible from, again, that you took until your final home game last year to get to last season. There is so much to like about where this team is. Oh, Lars is having some internet issues, but there is so much to like about where this team is right now compared to where they were last year that you shouldn't help but get excited about what's next for Washington. You look at this 2026 class. There are probably going to be a couple more late additions to it as well. And if you can do that and just continue building and have some more key contributors come in early, just like you have this year, where you've had, 5 true freshmen start for you already this season, Jedd Fisch, this coaching staff, they're cooking something up, and there's a lot to be excited about. But until next time with all that, thank you so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. If you want to make sure that you're up to date with all the latest in Husky athletics and for, everything when we go live like this, please make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you don't miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please give us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Monday.